Warning: the following show contains intelligent thoughts, well-formulated ideas, and occasional pointless banter. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Hashing Out the Details. I am your host, D.L. Williams. Today is Thursday, April 21st, 2022. Well, I would first of all like to wish all of you out there a belated, very happy and blessed Easter. I hope you had a great holiday weekend. I sure did. My family and I enjoyed some time with relatives and friends. It was a good time to get together. Of course, it was obviously a spiritual holiday, so we attended church services with our church family, and that was a great time together. Now, I don't know about any of you all out there, but in my family, the major holidays, such as Christmas and Easter, tend to be highlighted by what I like to call the Big Four, and that's faith, friends, family, and food. Now, big thing in my family is I was raised in a very ethnically Eastern European family. We were raised on a lot of traditions that were brought over by our ancestors to this country at the beginning of the last century from what was then called Czechoslovakia or the Slovak republics. A lot of the foods that I was raised on were very traditional. And by traditional, I mean they're very ethnically traditional, specific to Slovaks and little Hungarian, because a lot of those groups sort of intermingled in that area. It was a very blended society of Hungarian, Slovak, Polish type ethnic traditions, but mainly Slovak. So a lot of the foods that I make, I was taught to make by my grandmother. And some of the recipes that I use have been verified more or less to down back hundreds of years. And I'll be honest, I make them not just because I enjoy them, and I do. I make them because, for me, they're an opportunity to, in a way, connect and commune with my ancestors, which is important to me personally. Now, I'll give you a perfect example. At Easter time, one of the things I make, and I was taught to make by my grandmother, is a food called siddick. I've also heard it called horutka, and some people simply call it egg ball, or Easter cheese is another one that I've heard it called. And honestly, all those words fit. From what I understand, it really comes down to what part of that area you were from as to what you called it. There's a lot of foods in the Eastern European traditions that have many names that actually really just boil down to where you came from, so what they all called the same foods. Sort of like how in the U.S. you have hoagies, grinders, submarine sandwiches, and those are all actually different terms for the exact same item, a long bunned sandwich. It's much the same with a lot of the foods that come out of that traditional ethnic group as well, or out of the traditions of that particular ethnic area. Anyways, siddick is produced in a very unique way. You, for all intents and purposes, gather all the ingredients that you would put in eggnog, save cinnamon. It's eggs, milk, like vanilla flavoring, and sugar. And you obviously blend all that together so it's very well incorporated together. It is then very slowly cooked over a very low heat. I use a double boiler. I've also known some people that bake it. There's different techniques all accomplish the same thing. But anyways, you're not looking to cook outright the eggs. You're looking to slowly curdle them. As you're slowly cooking them, you're constantly stirring them so that you end up with is a sweetened vanilla-y scrambled egg slurry, which you then pour into a piece of cheesecloth. Gather it up tight, spin it around, and then tie it off tight with twine so that what you have inside the cheesecloth is a very tightly squeezed ball, which you then proceed to hang from some type of heightened area with a bucket underneath. My grandmother, and what I actually do is I hang it right off my clothesline in my backyard. It's usually cold enough at night during this time of year that it's not a problem. And you allow it to drain overnight. And come morning, when you bring it in, you cut open the cheesecloth. What you now have is a congealed ball, and you simply slice it up and eat it on Easter. It is not a taste for everyone. I can honestly say from my experience, it's not an acquired taste either. It's something you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it, and probably for life. It's one of those kinds of things. Now, I personally love it. My father-in-law had never had it in his life. He enjoys it. My daughter will eat a few pieces here or there. I don't think my wife is particularly fond of it, but again, she wasn't raised on it. It's not just about the eating of it, to be honest, for me at all. I find a certain level of comfort and reaffirmation in taking part in the tradition of making it. I like knowing that as I'm cracking open those eggs on, the darkness of Good Friday evening, that as I'm cracking open those eggs and I'm adding that small amount of milk, and as I'm adding those other ingredients and I'm stirring it up, and there I am with a pot over the stove, and I'm slowly stirring it with my wooden spatula, I feel a sense of commune with those who have come before me. And that I know that on that night, and traditionally I was always taught it was done on Good Friday, the night of Good Friday, that in the past, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, maybe even longer, 200 years, my ancestors were there on that same night doing the same thing. I enjoy that feeling of knowing where I came from, and that I'm carrying on a legacy for them. That their efforts were not lost to history. They say that the average person is forgotten within 3 generations. Like, how many of us know the names of our great-grandparents? My ancestors passed down something that still exists now, many, many generations later, and I'm carrying it on. And this year, I started teaching my daughter, who's 11, to make some of the traditional foods that we make come Easter time. She started to show an interest. I'm very proud of her. She helped me making homemade dumplings for a particular dish called strapachi, and also for halushki. She helped me working on those and getting them ready for Easter dinner, for Easter Day. And I hope I felt the same feeling my grandma had as she watched me as a young boy sitting there next to her. The same as I was looking down at my daughter doing the same thing, spilling flour rather awkwardly into the bowl, cracking the eggs in and just hoping they didn't get a shell in. I felt a great amount of connection to my grandmother, knowing that that's probably the same sight she saw and the same feeling she had in her heart as she watched me taking the mantle from her, as she trained me to take the baton onward. I am very aware of my mortality. I know I will not be of this world forever. I know our time here is relatively short on the long view of history. We are just but a grain of sand in the desert. But if I can pass these traditions on to my daughter, I will have effectively handed on a legacy to her that I hope someday she'll understand the value of it the way that I actually do. Then that she'll have the pride in making those things the same as I do today. And I hope she'll feel the same feeling of commune with me someday. And that she'll know that I was doing the same thing on that same night as she carries it forward. Anyways, also, I want to talk a little bit about, I'm not going to talk about Easter per se, but I want to talk about how different people celebrate Easter. Now, let's all be honest. I mean, I'm not hiding anything. There's no secrets here. I am an devout Christian. I'm a Bible believer. But I find it fascinating how the different branches of Christianity have found such unique and powerful ways to celebrate and commemorate Resurrection Sunday. Now, I've had the distinct pleasure of having been to many different types of churches in my lifetime. I have been a part of liturgical churches. I've been a part of evangelical. I've been a part of charismatic. churches. These are all different, very, very different faith traditions. But they all have great pride in how they celebrate and how they worship. I have been in a Byzantine Catholic church as they celebrated the midnight vigil on Holy Saturday. I have been there as I could feel the grace and glory of God shining down through the icons and the power of those incredible hymns that they sing, ancient hymns that have been sung for hundreds and even over 1,000 years on that night. They sing with such beautiful power and reverence as they try to recreate what we see and what we read about in the book of Revelation as worship in heaven. They sing the praises of God and the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, as it is called forth to be a part of their service. It's really quite beautiful. I mean, the imagery in those churches, the choir work, the singing, the hymns, even just the smell of the incense in their belief system that carries their prayers up to heaven. It's awe-inspiring. It truly is. It's absolutely a thing of beauty. I've also been a part of what a lot of churches call a sunrise service. I've actually been a part of a few different ones over the years. And I find this common in some of the perhaps like the Baptist churches, or a lot of non-denominational churches use this as well as their type of Easter celebration, or their type of Easter worship service, where they're in a way trying to reenact Mary Magdalene's time of coming to the tomb in the darkness and seeing the stone rolled away from the tomb just as the sun has begun rising over the hilltops into the sky. That is when they celebrate the time, the moment that they can proclaim Jesus has risen. There it is. I've heard them sing with power, with such joy in their hearts, and really beautiful music. They sing and they pray with such fervor, and they preach hard the resurrection. That death's power over humanity was broken at that time, that the sun coming up was the moment that humanity knew it had been saved. And it's enough to make your spine tingle. It's enough to make your heart leap for joy. Just fantastic. Beautiful service. I have also been a part of. I find that in a lot of the charismatic churches, I find that the following is their preferred method. They tend to gear more toward, I guess you might say, the theatrical or something along those lines, something more personal and artistic would be a better way. I've been a part of several services of this variety where they attempt to bring forth to mind the crucifixion and resurrection. We see a lot of things like passion plays and skits, poetry being read, history being recited, and it is heart touching. It is mind blowing to see the effort they put into such performances and these types of things that are meant to inspire and show forth live and in living color what Jesus went through, and that he returned in victory, not as a common traitor nailed to a tree, but as a triumphant king returning to the land of the living, slamming the doors on death, and just powerful preaching. Amazing service. The type of thing that will stiffen your resolve and really bring to heart and to mind what happened that day over 2,000 years ago and what happened for humanity. The moment that the curse upon this world and upon mankind was broken. No, not broken, shattered. I truly tell you that it's those types of events that strike me for the incredible beauty and the powerful emotions that humanity is capable of producing, and so much in contrast to the terrible darkness, evil, and pain that they're also capable of producing. Really gives you a lot to think about. Anyways, we're going to take a break for just a moment here while I catch my breath. When I get back, we're going to talk a little bit about springtime football. Stay tuned, and be right back. Okay, welcome back everyone. So anyways, the USFL, the new reincarnation of the early 80s football league, has begun play this past weekend. I believe they played 4 games this weekend over the holiday. They, from what I understand, received some pretty darn good TV numbers with kind of a captive audience in the sports world, with the exception of the NBA playoffs. From what I hear, actually the Nielsen ratings gave the NBA playoffs a run for their money. I'm going to say I'm mildly optimistic. We've seen a couple of these types of leagues try to get started and collapse before they can get their feet underneath them. That's kind of sad because football is such a megalith in this country as far as fanship and fan interest. I believe there's certainly a market for springtime football in this country, no questions asked. Really, once you get to springtime, the only sport in town that isn't gearing up for its end is baseball. While I certainly love baseball, don't get me wrong, it can be a little sad when it's almost the only game in town that isn't, gearing up to declare itself a champion. Hockey's moving into its playoffs, the NBA's moving into its playoffs. You know the end is near. Springtime football gives sports fans just another option to watch and spend some time with. Now, we saw in the, maybe in the last 10, 15 years, we've seen the XFL take 2 shots at this, getting started as a league, and the first time they just couldn't figure out what they were. If they were entertainment or if they were sport, they really were not sure what they wanted to be, and they folded after 1 year. We saw the XFL give it a second shot, and unfortunately COVID knocked it down to the ground just as fast as they got started. It's my understanding they are going to try again next year under new ownership, including Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson being involved. That's interesting as an owner. He certainly lends a little bit of muscle behind the hustle. I hope that they do well. In any case, the USFL played 4 games. Most of them were fairly competitive. There was some decent quality sport on the field. I watched part of a couple different games. I didn't see anything that alarmed me about it as far as quality of play. Kind of, in a lot of ways, from an eyeball test, it reminded me of the old World Football League, which we used to see on Fox a lot back in the 90s. Saw a lot of players come from that were able to kind of work their way into the NFL. I think of Kurt Warner, he was a big name that came out of the World Football League at one point. So I'm certainly hoping that this works out for them. I know the USFL seems to have some serious financial backing that the others that have tried this lacked in the past. We saw the, what was it called? The Alliance of American Football. I think it was called the AAFL, something like that, a couple of years back. That looked actually pretty good. I mean, the quality of football was certainly better than I expected. It was definitely above, college level. It was definitely better than I remember the old XFL looking. It definitely didn't look amateurish. They looked to be playing very well. It was run by a lot of good people, but their financial backing bailed out roughly halfway through the season, and the entire league just collapsed underneath itself. This USFL seems to have the full financial backing of the Fox Corporation. I thought that was a unique endeavor for them. I believe they have committed no less than $150 million, which they estimate is enough to keep the league running for 3 years, even if they made no profit or no money whatsoever. And if you look at the stands, it seems that their game plan is not to worry about ticket sales. They're not worried about getting people out there at the moment. They want to get this on TV, because that's where the real revenue is going to come from, and ads and things like that, and trying to establish a fan base for these teams. And that's the name of the game right there. If you can get people not just to watch the first week, because every time one of these leagues starts, you see it start off with a bang, and then it just fizzles out. To get a league like this to retain and maintain any kind of momentum, you've got to keep the people coming back so that they start to learn who these teams are, who these players are, and become actual fans of the franchises. If they can do that by keeping these teams and these games on television and enough people coming back watching to retain some interest, and the way they're going to do that is with good quality football. If you start going out there and watching a lot of sloppy play, nobody's going to be interested. The games this past weekend showed some semblance of professionalism and decent coaching. So I suspect that they'll be okay from a competition standpoint. I think they're going to be okay from a advertising and marketing standpoint. Really, you don't need the marketing early because curiosity will produce viewership. Once you get to that maybe third or fourth week, I think if they're smart, that's when they start to ramp up the advertising and the marketing, because that's the point when the just there for curiosity's sake folks will start to tune out and look for something else. But if you can market it enough, you just might get those people to stick around for an extra week or two. And by that point, you've watched maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks of these teams, and you're starting to get familiar with them. You're starting to learn these guys' names. You're starting to see who's the cream of the crop starting to rise to the top, and that's how a fan base is built. If they can maintain that strategy, I think they got something here. Now, next year, again, what I was saying before, the XFL is expected to kick off, and with a lot of pretty big backers, they seem to have all their ducks in a row to get started. I think it would be fascinating to see these two leagues, was for all intents and purposes, are going to be competitors playing at the same time and fighting for the same pool of players. Where the USFL seems to have all the big financial and power backing as far as marketing, the XFL has a somewhat limited partnership set up with the NFL, where they're going to use them for more or less experimenting for rules and equipment and things of that nature, where it's going to be more or less a petri dish for the NFL. I thought that was an amazing idea, because not only does the NFL get a place where they can test out little tweaks and ideas they have to improve their league, it gives the XFL kind of the big brother to lean on in the situation that the USFL's a little too good for them. They had Big Brother to kind of pump them up, and the NFL, knowing that having the XFL at its disposal with those parameters, is more than likely going to be willing to give them a little prop here or there to keep them up and going, because they don't want to lose that resource for themselves. That way, they don't have to test things with their own league teams, their own players. They can let the XFL do it for them and be able to simply, enjoy the fruits of the results without having to sacrifice their own teams and players to the experimentation process. We will see what comes of all this. I hope for the best. I'm a firm believer. Give me all the football you can give me. I'll watch a bunch of little kids play on the street. I don't care. I love football. So the more the better. Here's to hopefully a long and happy season for the USFL. I hope they do well. I hope they do great. I hope everyone out there will give them a chance and watch a few weeks worth of games and see if you can't find something that you can get behind. Some team that you find interesting or you'd like to continue following. Because if we can do that, folks, we're all going to be happier as football fans if we have more to watch. So anyways, I'm going to take one more break for just a minute here. And when we get back, I am going to talk about U.S. third parties. That's right, we're going to talk about third-party politics in the United States of America. Stay tuned, I'll be right back. Okay, thank you everyone for sticking with me today. Now, like I said, we're going to talk about a unspoken reality of U.S. American politics, and that there are more than two parties in U.S. American politics. We all think of politics and political parties as being limited to the Democratic and the Republican parties. Now, in fact, there are currently 57 registered political parties in the country with at least 1,000 registered members. That means people who have registered with their state as a voter who are members of these minor parties. The fact of the matter is that when you talk about elections, really you only see the top two, those Democratic and Republican candidates, getting any kind of real media coverage. And there's actually a reason in that most of the third parties that are out there, as opposed to the Democrats and Republicans who are very much about ideologies. The Democratic Party pretty much representing the liberal or progressive section of the electorate, whereas the Republican Party tends to lean far toward the conservative side of the electorate in the nation. There are also a number of parties which, unlike the top two, the Democrat and Republican again, they tend to focus more on issues as opposed to ideology. I'll give you a few examples so that maybe you'll understand where I'm going with this, and I promise you, hang with me here. It's going to sound a little wordy, so I ask you to please hang with me. I have a real point to this, I promise. The third party makeup of the country is led by the top two, which are the Green Party and the Libertarian. The Green Party is an association of the left-wing European Greens movement. For the most part, if you review their platform, it boils down to environmentalism almost entirely. Every policy, every idea they present is almost entirely built around a philosophy of environment first. They wish to end any and all logging. They wish to expand upon animal rights. As a matter of fact, there are some who actually argue for citizenship for animals. That's not a party platform, but it is a strong wing of the party who advocates for that type of thing. What you'll see in the second of the large two is going to be reminiscent of this, the Libertarians. They are, for all intents and purposes, peaceful anarchists. They wish to abolish virtually any and all law which restricts individual freedom. Now that sounds lovely, except when you start looking into it a little deeper. They wish to legalize any and all drugs. They actually advocate for the abolishment of prescriptions for any kind of drugs. They want full access for any and all citizens to any and all drugs, be they be the street version or pharmaceutical type drugs. They are in favor of the abolishment of driver's license and all professional licenses, such as electricians. They wish to deregulate businesses, end the minimum wage. They wish for no income tax. They wish for absolute free trade amongst nations, including individuals to other nations. They want no restriction of any real type. That's their calling card. So I've just looked at just the big two, and I can, instead of an ideology for either one, I can really pare them down to just an issue. You have the Green Party, they're all about the environment. You got the Libertarians, they're all about no restrictions. Now, if you move a little further down to some of the smaller ones, I'll give you a couple examples there. You have the Alliance Party, which really is they are a party that is made up of those who felt uncomfortable in a whole host of other smaller parties who either folded or they felt that they weren't represented properly. They're a centrist party. But if you review their platform, the entire platform is based on changing the voting procedures in this country. They want mostly to eliminate national debt. They want to change the voter system to a ranked choice voting. They want to encourage voter registration amongst just about everyone. There is a wing of this party which advocates for lowering the voting age to 12 years of age. There's a number of issues that they espouse, all really coming back to the issue of changing the voting system. You move on down here, I can show you the American Solidarity Party. The American Solidarity Party can be boiled down, much like its brethren in the minor parties, to a single issue. They are all about converting the United States to match Catholic social teaching. A review of their platform is really, it's a copy and paste of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. They are pro-life, anti-death penalty, pro-welfare, anti-gay marriage, pro-universal health care, pro-environmental protection, and anti-military. They are more or less a political wing of the Catholic Church. If you go down a little further, you start running into things like the Constitution Party. Their idea is simply to pare the entire government down to only those things specifically located within the Constitution. Now, don't get me wrong, I am fully in favor of our Constitution. I am not a believer in the concept that it's a living document. I believe it means exactly what the framers meant it to mean. Now, the thing about the Constitution Party is that with them being so militantly only Constitution, that would eliminate things like all of the public welfare system. It would eliminate much of the schooling system. Many of the things that we consider to be under the auspices of the government are not specifically written in the Constitution. Social Security is another example. Disability. All of those things would be eliminated. And if you review their platform, their suggestion is simply to hand it off to charity organizations. That's a lot to ask of a place like the Salvation Army, I think. Another I can bring to you here is my personal favorite, the Pirate Party. I'm sorry, the name kills me every time I read it. But it is actually an affiliate of the European-based Pirate Parties International umbrella. Their sole concern is the eradication and abolishment of any and all copyright laws. Their platform has no other issue, no other statements. It is entirely based around the idea of the abolishment of copyright laws. Another small party with an interesting platform is the Independent American Party. Their entire platform is based on the teachings of the Mormon Church. Matter of fact, upon review of their policy and platform, it's a copy and paste of one of the Mormon scriptures. It's called the Pearl of Great Price. For all intents and purposes, the Independent American Party is the Mormon equivalent to the American Solidarity Party as for the Catholic. Last but not least, from what I'm going to run through here, is another one of my favorites, the Canary Party. They are entirely based on the issue of healthcare. They're anti-vaccination, pro-patient law. When you look over the platform, absolutely no reaching out to other issues of any form, shape, or variety. What disappoints me when I look over all these parties is that the ones that are unique have no platform beyond single issue, and the rest are based upon, again, an ideology, but it's all the same. I counted roughly 37 different quote-unquote socialist or communist minor parties. They outnumber non-communist or avowed socialist policy parties 17-1. So a lot of them have almost the exact same ideas, but no ideas. They have the same ideologies, but no ideas on how to implement them or how to use them to better the country. One of the great problems of our current political situation is that, historically speaking, politics' purpose was that everyone had a roughly common vision of the final destination, where everyone wanted the country. Everybody believed in the same end goal. They were all heading for the same place. The political arguments really were about what was the best way to get there. Right now in our country, we have a problem of vision, in that the Democrats and Republicans especially, their idea for what constitutes the ideal destination, they are not even in the same book. You have two teams trying to steer us to entirely different destinations. It'd be like the way things are going, every 4 years, you spend 4 years driving in a car on a long trip. And at the end of that 4 years, somebody At the end of that 4 years, somebody else takes over driving, turns around, and drives a whole different direction to a new place. But before they can get there, somebody else jumps in the car, turns it around, and drives back the other way again. You'll never get to your destination so long as we are constantly swapping leadership, which, is part of our United States political procedures, is to change leadership as we feel they need to be changed. But with them so bent on their particular ideologies, they keep turning the country around like a car that is never going to get to a final destination so long as it's constantly being turned and steered the other way. Every time the country starts going in a specific direction, it gets turned by new leadership, which the Founding Fathers, George Washington detested political parties. He was petrified of them. He thought they would ruin the country. I'm not going to say they ruined the country, but we've certainly seen our problems become multiplied due to the partisan stalemate that is going on, especially at the federal level. It's painful. So, what's the answer? You hear a lot of people say, well, we should just start expanding the political table. In a way, I agree with that. But who are you expanding it to? I just went through a list of roughly 8 to 10 political parties that exist beyond simply Democrats and Republicans, and they're not saying a lot. They don't seem to have many ideas on how they would govern differently. Is that what's going to help? I'll tell you what I think is going to help, my friends. My pitch in all this is that I'm a firm believer the more options you have, the better off you're always going to be. I like options. I don't want to go to McDonald's and see 2 hamburgers on the menu. I don't want to go to the store and only have 2 types of potato chips to choose from. I like choices. Right now, especially at the very top of the line, the President of the United States, we get 2 options every cycle because of the way we've dug down into these ideologies without room for what's going to work best. Our political leaders are functioning under a strategy of what's going to work best under our umbrella and within our specific ideology. I don't believe that that's going to work, folks. I really don't. Hey, I might be wrong, but it hasn't worked very often in the past. More often than not, we have the best leaders are the ones who are able to look at a situation and make the best decision for how it's going to work for the country. However, in the end, I think the answer to this problem is in bringing more voices to the table. We need our leaders to be willing to talk with leaders' different ideologies from themselves. And the ones who espouse those ideologies, such as these third parties, need to have more ideas on real issues. If we can gather more people to the table, it's going to present more options. Options lead to ideas. Ideas lead to solutions. Solutions which work. Not just the ones that fit inside your ideology. If I personally was president, and let's say I was a Republican, and I sat down and I looked at a problem, and the only pragmatic way to solve that problem was going to be to increase taxes for 5 years. Guess what, folks? I'm going to increase taxes for 5 years to solve the problem because the problem needed to be solved. Even though I'm a Republican and a matter of principle against increasing taxes, if that is what it takes to solve the problem, even as a president, I'm going to do so. Why? Because it's what I was hired to do. That's my job, to make decisions that work for the people. It is also the job of Congress and Senate to make decisions not based on your party, not based on your ideology, but based on what's going to work for the country. And the biggest problem we have is that nobody's talking to each other. And when they do, they put their hands up and say, la, 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 I don't want to hear it because it doesn't fit with how I want things to be. But you know what? If it wasn't just the 2 of them, and there were, let's say, 10 other voices at that table, When those two started arguing, the other 7 or 8 would keep talking. Until finally, an agreement was made where they all sat back and said, you know what, I think we have a way to go here. I think we have a solution. And they turned back to the first two who were putting their hands over their ears and refusing to listen to what each other had to say. And they'd look at them and say, well, you guys sit over there and argue. We're going to go ahead and fix this. That's how it would work. I really hope that we can find a way to bring more ideas, more options, more voices into the public arena, especially into the political one. I think it's time. The country deserves it. The country needs it. I think that's just about all the time we're going to have today. I'd like to say thank you to all for tuning in on Hashing Out the Details. I have been your host, D.L. Williams. Thank you all and have a great night.